Hey, it's Matt O'Leary. I've been sitting with this album, the overview, and I thought it's time to just rank the whole discography from Steven Wilson, maybe the most recognizable face and name in modern progressive rock. And as the biggest name in modern prog, Steven Wilson really follows the heritage of the auteur, as he calls it, or the auteur. That person whose distinctive style, personality just comes through so strong in everything that they make that they really have to be their own producer. Like there's no other option. And it's really difficult to separate the artist from the art with Steven Wilson because he's so tied up into it. Like I said, maybe it's that he gives so many interviews and you hear him say so much about each concept and each album that is really coloring the experience. But it's safe to say that he's one of my favorite modern artists. I don't love everything he does, but there are so many gems in the catalog. He's been so influential on my own music and musical taste. And so this exercise wasn't too difficult, actually. It's already kind of burnt in my mind, all these albums, so I didn't have to listen many times. I also ranked the albums of Porcupine Tree, which I'll throw below somewhere. Let's get into it. He's got 8 solo albums. He's been very prolific since the first one came out in 2008. But I just had to start with 2021's The Future Bites. It's a common pick, I know, but I really think of this album as the art project. It's art and concept above any of the things that I really fell in love with Steven's music. If you like some of the 80s influences in Wilson's work, which is a big part of his musical DNA, then maybe you'll like this one. It's very cold, the aesthetic is more minimal and chilly. It's less about melody and harmony and lushness and his 70s influences and more about texture and mood. There's a lot of kind of talk singing and a big emphasis on delivery and style, and it's just not really my thing. I think my favorite song by far is 12 Things I Forgot, which is far and away the most traditional song here. Pair those flaws with a really long lead-up time. The single was released so far in advance. To me, that's always a recipe for disaster. And no, this wasn't a disaster. It's fine, it's good, it's okay. There's just a lot better stuff. I really struggled with this next album placement because I have a chip on my shoulder about it. I feel like it's better than people give it credit for. And that is the album that channeled the pop side of Steven, the Kate Bush, the Peter Gabriel solo career to the bone. If you're interested in the pop side of what he does and not so much this grand conceptual prog stuff, songs like The Same Asylum as Before, Nowhere Now, Blank Tapes, these are a great starting point and hold up to some of his best pop stuff. I'd even say Permeating, which is just so undeniably catchy. Yes, I think it's kind of Steven playing dress up a little bit, but the song's so good that it doesn't even matter. Some moments fall completely flat for me, like People Who Eat Darkness or Song of I, but it's a pretty decent pop record, and you just gotta put yourself in his shoes, Just imagine if you were a successful solo artist, a successful musician with this kind of longevity. There's no doubt your catalog would have some eclecticism. It would go back and forth. You would just naturally explore different areas of your interests and taste. And yeah, I don't blame him for that. It's a really, solid effort. Now for something a little more challenging. It is an album that forces you to sit down. It's purposely antiquated in the sense that you have to absorb it, you have to sit with it, you have to expand your attention span. But it's also on the cutting edge of music making in so many ways, sound design most notably. And that is my number 6 album here, the new one, The Overview. I said yes, she played. Even though I collect records and I subscribe to that old-fashioned idea of the album experience and the power of the album and album sequencing and all of that, I'm still kind of a song guy. I really like 3 to 5 minute songs. It's kind of my jam. But I have an open mind with albums that are structured like this, with these super long songs, and there are definitely a handful of albums that are some of my favorites that do the same thing. I think of the overview so far as a collage album that glues little clippings of everything Steven's basically ever done into one picture. You know, I recognize synth patches here, I recognize guitar tones. The more Floydy stuff here reminds me of 90s Porcupine Tree. Like, I definitely hear, especially in the title track, portions of like the Stupid Dream, Light Bulb Sun era, but there's also the level of sonic detail and, like I said, sound design of his more recent stuff. I think of the arpeggiation, the electronics at the beginning of the title track, and I think that moment is as mesmerizing as Steven wanted it to be. Listening back to these albums, there's this big, epic, ethereal falsetto moment in the song Impossible Tightrope that really reminds me of what he's doing with this first song here. You know, I feel like this is tied to every era. The first track is my favorite here, which is not an unpopular opinion. You know, I feel like that moment that Andy Partridge helped write the lyrics for is a clear standout. I mentioned attention span, and in honesty, I don't have it. At times, there are moments on this album where I drift off and maybe my mind goes elsewhere. And with that said, it's a pleasant drift. You know, it's nice mood music, for as much as Steven might hate that phrase. I do find that I get more from the concept of the overview just on paper than I do from what Steven's actually saying about it on this album, but at least the music serves as a nice sound bed to just consider that concept, and ideas do bubble and percolate. Musically, I like almost everything he's doing here. If anything, it just doesn't push far enough. I get to the end of this and I'm like, is that it? Which brings us to another album that really flexes Wilson's range, even to a more extreme extent in each of those directions, and that is the most challenging, I think, of the Steven Wilson solo albums. Ultimately, I was up for the challenge, and it's the Harmony Codex at number 5. The concept that I've latched onto here is the cover art being that staircase, and just this idea that the central focus is the journey and not the destination. This is maybe his most anti-genre album, with electronics and jazz fusion in equal measure. And in being so far-reaching and so untethered to any genre pocket, I think it's also his most hit-or-miss album for me. Like, it's got some moments that are higher than any highs in the catalog, songs like Time Is Running Out or Staircase, but lows that are also lower. There are some moments here that I really never want to return to, like the extremely repetitive chord structure of Rock Bottom. Still one where every time I listen to it, there's something totally new to pick out. So very deep album in that way. And next up, we've got number 4. This is the top half of the discography. This is really the cream of the crop for me. And it's an album I don't see get a lot of love. It's the debut album from 2008, Insurgentes. Harmony Corinne is one of his best songs, hands down. I think all the songs on this thing that have a more traditional instrumentation and structure are just gold, like Significant Other and the title track. And I think the experiments on this album, the places where he really pushed the boundaries, did something that subverted people's expectations, especially at the time with him coming off of Porcupine Tree, are better than basically any of the experiments on the recent albums, the ones that I just talked about. Strangely, I like all the electronic stuff on this album. I like all the darker moments, the colder moments. Like, when I think about Insurgentes, it's on the cold side of the spectrum. Whereas, you know, the Raven is like the warmest of warm. So yeah, I really recommend going back to Insurgentes if you haven't in a while. I think this is a super underrated record. At number 3 is an album I remember my wife getting me for my birthday one year. So I have a very like visceral, physical memory of it. The vinyl has a way of doing that. It's an album that draws more heavily on jazz with these big, lengthy, and heavy solo sections, like his heaviest stuff, and that is Grace for Drowning. Yeah, Steven Wilson's not like black metal, but, you know, relatively dark. The big epic on this thing, Raider 2, is so treacherous, it's so dark, it's just, maybe the song that I would wanna hear him play live, if anything. And then on the other side of that, you got, like, Deformed to Form a Star, Postcard, some of my favorite pop moments from him in all. Then there's kind of a connection to Insurgentes in the song Index, I feel like, which is more of that kinda art house approach, more conceptual, something that he's done a lot more in recent times. I think Steven's so obsessed with this idea of doing something different, being unpredictable as an artist, that he forgets how much people like this sound. Yeah, I understand in a sense he doesn't want to retread territory. I just think he could paint new paintings with the same palette, if that makes sense. Like, to me, if it's a new melody, if it's a new song, new lyric, it's new. Like, you can still use the same raw materials, and I would love to see him do a little bit more of this. But for that very reason, he will not. Okay, so number 1 and 2, these were pretty expected as well. I see just across the fan base that these are the 2 most lauded albums. They're the 2 masterpieces, and I can't argue with it. It's number 2, The Raven That Refused to Sing. I think Drive Home might be his best song, and the solo section is just so unforgettable, so momentous. It really, that moment alone could sort of represent all of modern prog right there. Like, that is the pinnacle. The title track, Ender, is a great moment as well. I think it's such a strange melody, such a strange structure to that song. And I love the concept as well of, you know, someone's sister or spouse passing away. I forget what it is. And the raven kind of represents her, and it won't sing. And, you know, you're yearning to just experience that love again. Luminol is incredible. I think The Watchmaker is another highlight for me, with the shifting moods. Like, talk about just spanning an emotional range within one song. The Watchmaker is that. And I can't say too much more about it that hasn't already been said. Like, if you don't like this album, you probably don't like progressive rock music. It's just a good test. It's really a seminal moment. But my number 1 album, for sure, is Hand Cannot Erase. I talked about having this visceral experience, this physical memory of, you know, having the vinyl of Grace for Drowning. This thing is very similar. I got this album and I just remember where I was in life, and that's really tied to the whole experience. And whenever I listen to it, it just takes me right back there, and it's really good. I think 3 Years Older is my favorite Steven Wilson track, and it's so dynamic. Like, the lows are low, the highs are high, just in volume, you know, which I think is something that's core to Steven Wilson's approach, not just in writing, but in his production work as well. He really emphasizes that. Ninette Tayeb's contributions here are my favorite of anything she's done with Steven. You know, I mentioned I'm not crazy about the song on the Harmony Codex, not crazy about Pariah. In all, this album just has such a diverse track list. Like, if I think of every song, I can imagine it in my head, I can play it, and they have such a unique identity, which is something I really value in music. You know, I'll spoil it for you. My favorite Porcupine Tree album is Deadwing, and it's kind of the same thing. Like, it just goes all over the map. And that's going to cover it. That is my ranking of the Steven Wilson albums, at least how it stands now. You know, I've had the overview for a week, so who knows? That thing could climb its way up. And now that you know the official, the objective Steven Wilson album ranking, then we can just stop this debate. We don't even need to discuss. But actually, I'm really interested in what you think about Steven Wilson and just the whole phenomenon, because he's kind of a big deal if you haven't noticed. Again, I'll leave that Porcupine Tree ranking down below. I'll put it as a link after the video as well. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and as always, thank you so much for watching.